Well, let me ask you, because I know we're going to talk about Jews for Jesus, and I do want to point out again that you say that the story, this is your mom's story, correct?
And my dad.
And your dad, called to controversy, the unlikely story of Moishe Rosen and the founding of Jews for Jesus, written by Ruth Rosen. Is that correct?
That's my sister.
That's
yes.
your sister. Okay.
That's the one I phoned when I came to the Lord.
Okay. Okay. But just so it's interesting, is this call to controversy, right? And thinking about Jews for Jesus and this great ministry, and we know that the Jews are getting saved all around the world today, right? But what is that like to be in a Jewish community, and or to be around Jews that are not saved? Did you feel ostracized? Was there, what was that like?
I remember when I was in grade school and we had just come back from our spring break, which for me was Passover and Resurrection Sunday, or you might say Easter Sunday. So there I had my hard-boiled eggs that were dyed and my matzah, which is unleavened bread. And I'm at school, and one of my friends said, "What have you got for lunch?" And I said, "It's an Easter egg and matzah." And she said, Are you kidding me? You can't be Jewish and a Christian. You have to choose." And I said, "Are you looking at me?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm looking at you." I said, "Well, I am Jewish, and I do believe in Jesus. So I guess that makes me a Jewish Christian." That's what we called ourselves then.
And did she accept that? Did she understand that?
She knew that I was earnest, and she knew that I believed what I was saying, but generally speaking, the last 2,000 years we've been told you can't be Jewish and believe in Jesus. So as far as growing up in the Jewish community, I think Alan probably could tell you more what that's like, because I've only known being in the Jewish community, but he probably, as somebody coming into it in adult life, could tell you better.
Sure.
We think that probably only about 1 or 2% of the Jewish people alive right now believe in Jesus as their Messiah. And so it's a gospel-resistant group. It's not a violent group. You're likely to encounter the 3 monkeys: see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. I'm not listening, I have my fingers in my ears. But if you think about Peter and James and John and Paul and who they were culturally and what they believed about Jesus, that's us. Basically, I'm a partaker of the Commonwealth of Israel. I'm like any missionary. This is the people group to whom I'm sent. And sometimes I forget I'm not Jewish. I tell the young ones, "Stick with me, kid. I'll teach you some Yiddish." But it is a hard row to hoe, because, like Moishe pointed out in his story, when it all came together for him is when he interacted with the scriptures. Barbara, you could go to synagogue 52 weeks out of the year, and if you were faithful and on time and paying attention, you would get through the 5 books of Moses in their entirety in Hebrew. And there are selected readings from the writings and the prophets, in other words, from the Psalms and from Isaiah or Jeremiah, but you wouldn't understand the thrust of what was the challenge in Isaiah's day. What is the book of Isaiah telling the Jewish people? What are the applications we can get out of it? You would just hear some poetry that seems to kind of go along with the Torah. So we challenge people to interact directly with the scriptures, to think for themselves. We challenge people to pray and ask God to show them who the Messiah is. And guess who it ends up being? His name is actually Yeshua, in the Aramaic, the Galilean-style Hebrew dialect that Jesus and his family spoke. And that means salvation. Lyn sort of alluded to that. Salvation is a person. It's not a thing. It's not an abstract noun.
So, Lyn, you talked about getting involved with Jews for Jesus sometime after college, or and said that. So when was this? Like in the 70s?
I graduated in February of 1973.
Okay.
And Jews for Jesus actually incorporated in September of 1973.
Okay.
Most of us who were the early part of the movement had other jobs that fed our evangelism habit. by saying evangelism, I mean, you know, we were driven. We wanted to share Jesus with other people. We wanted to let other people in our areas know that Jesus was the way for them to have a right relationship with God who created us. So we had other jobs. So I had another job. I did not come on staff until a year after Alan and I had married, and Alan and I both came on staff in 1975, and he has worked faithfully full-time with Jews for Jesus ever since September of 1975, or was it November?
So you were both in your 20s then,
Right.
when you joined.
Yes.
Wow. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about how Jesus freaks are, you know, they don't like organizations, and so they just like movements. And so we were, you know, going to Bible study before we came on staff, and we were, you know, spending maybe Labor Day, would go out with the other people and street preach, you know, down at Cannery Row there in San Francisco where all the tourists are and things like that. And in a sense, that's still the spirit of Jews for Jesus. We want to tell what God's done, but how did we ever get to be an institution or an organization? Well, people give you money because they're encouraged, and then you have to be good stewards, and then you have to go ask somebody who knows more than you, like an accountant from a church, and then he says, oh, you have to become a 501c3.
Right.
Lyn's dad said we never intended to be an organization. You know, we were going to just hang together as a group and keep working as long as God was blessing, as long as things were happening in our midst. But, you know, we got to write some receipts if people give us some money. So now we're an organization.
Yes.
No one was more surprised than my father when Jews for Jesus went international.
Yeah.
Now we are in, 14 different countries?
Yeah, so talk about that, because this is what, over 30 years now, right? That this movement, this organization, right?
We're coming up on our 40th anniversary next year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I can't even imagine all the things that have taken place, and I know that we're showing some pictures of you ministering, and but talk about how the ministry has evolved. What's happening? What's happening on the streets? What's happening locally, and then what's happening abroad, right?
Sure. Well, you know, the Chicago area has about 260,000 Jewish people in the various villages, you know, that make up our Chicagoland area. And that's a big task. I don't think we're going to be able to do it all by ourselves with our 6 or 7 people that work in our office. And so we want to also mobilize Christians that are not Jewish to share their faith, which ironically, you know, kind of it's come full circle from the Jewish people. If you read your book of Romans, you know, the oracles of God belong to the Jews and so forth. And it's ironic for Jewish people to feel that the gospel might be for everybody else except for them. Well, Jesus is not the warlord God of the Gentiles. He is the Messiah of Israel. And so what we want to do is make ourselves visible. You'll find that my van has large letters, Jews for Jesus. I readily get in conversations at the gas station and the grocery store with people. And we pass out gospel tracts. We'll like to go down maybe to the shopping areas of downtown on the day after Thanksgiving, get a whole army of volunteers out there to pass out as many tracts as we can, or at the shooting of the fireworks, Independence Day, you know, if we can find where that is nowadays, that changes. And that's the kind of thing we do city after city. Some might be doing the New York Macy's Thanksgiving Parade. Others might be down around the Rose Bowl in Los Angeles. Well, we found a whole group of open people in the former Soviet Union, in those CIS, Confederation of Independent States. A lot of people in Odessa and Kiev and Moscow, and some really salty workers there, Jewish people who have come from darkness into light, and so that's where we find a real opening, because people are reconsidering. The wall has come down, communism experiment is over, you know, and people are displaced, and now what's happening there? Maybe the mafia is moving in, or maybe the state is not answering all of our, you know, needs, and so people are kind of considering. They're open.
Yes.
The thing that excites me is we have a commitment that the missionaries who are in each country would be indigenous.
So what does that mean? That's a big word.
Yeah, the indigenous people, the people who live there, who speak that language, who have come to faith in Jesus are now the ones that are leading the works in the different countries. The man who's in Paris is French.
Right.
The man who's in...
Those make the best missionaries, right?
Yes.
Homegrown.
The Tel Aviv
Yes.
crew, yeah.
Yes, and the other thing that I'm very excited about is now we have 2 branches in the state of Israel. Just this summer we opened our 2nd Israeli branch, and it's in Haifa. So I won't get to be a missionary there because Hebrew is not my native language.
So what do you see happening? Like in the years that you've been doing this, are Jews coming to the Lord? Are they coming in large numbers? You know, how are they responding to this?
They're coming to the Lord one by one, but the ripples are going out throughout the Jewish community. There is hardly a Jewish family you can find that doesn't have someone in it that has known Jesus as Messiah, maybe in the extended family. There's all kinds of committees being constituted to try to answer this. The Jewish community seems to be on a survival mentality right now, and my word to them is relax. Jeremiah says God's got you covered. As long as the sun's in the sky and the moon's there, that's a testimony. I will not let you fade, you know, from before me.
Yes.
But the intermarriage rate, if it gets to 51%, which is where we're floating right now, or if there's, you know, the fears of assimilation, or if Jewish people are not practicing their religion, but just culturally trying to figure their way, then there's kind of an identity crisis. And individuals, when they hear the gospel, are responding to it. And then the rest of the community is circling the wagon saying, what can we do about this? It's sad and ironic because someone who comes to faith who's Jewish doesn't stop being Jewish. They return to the God of their fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now the story in Genesis of Isaac being bound by Abraham makes sense. That was a hint of what was going to happen at Calvary when God sent his son.
Yes.
He took his only son, you know, like it says of Isaac.
Yes.
So we're finding a lot of individuals are interested, and a lot of people are coming to faith, and there are messianic congregations being planted.
Yeah, talk about messianic congregations, right, for folks that really don't understand what that is. Because I was going to ask you, so I'm a Jewish believer, you know, do I feel comfortable going to a church, some Christian church? Do I want to still be somewhere where maybe there's some cultural connections as well?
I would hope that you would be comfortable with worshiping with anybody who loves Jesus. Thankfully, here in the Chicagoland area, we have several congregations of Jewish people worshiping Jesus in a way that's culturally relevant for them. So that's what we would call a messianic congregation. There's a word thing happening here. Messiah, messianic. That's Messiah. The Hebrew word is Moshiach, then you have Messiah, and then so English is Messiah and messianic would follow there. Now the other word that you know very well is Christos, which in English we have Christ. So someone who follows Christ is a Christian. So whether you're Christian or whether you're messianic really is a matter of a language. And so when you come to a worship at a messianic synagogue, you might find that some of the songs have Hebrew with the English. Some of the prayers are in Hebrew and then translated into English. And people are comfortable because this harkens back to earlier religious experiences as a child. So, of course, being what Paul wrote, that the church is like an olive tree, and we're Jews and Gentiles grafted into the same body of believers. There's not two kinds of churches.
Yes, that's right.
There's only one church. The body of Messiah Jesus is Jews and Gentiles together worshiping. So if a person felt more comfortable worshiping only with Jewish people and they lived someplace where there wasn't a messianic congregation, I would tell them, just go. You'll see the people are really nice. They may not do things the way you would want to do them, but in time you will grow accustomed and you will love it. But I'm so happy that here we have several different congregations to choose from for people who want to worship Jesus in a Jewish way. And we have a lot of people that come to our congregation which is not affiliated with Jews for Jesus. It's its own congregation. And People come, Jews and Gentiles alike, and they want to see what is it like to worship Jesus in a Jewish way.
Yeah.
Were you going to say something?
I was just thinking about the congregations. If you look at the visuals and you didn't have the audio, you'd say, oh, this is a Jewish place. And you listen to the audio and you say, well, everything is about Jesus. He's not just tacked on the end here. But a kind of exuberant worship, you know. If there's tambourines, you know, and there's a spirited upbeat, sounds like, you know, Fiddler on the Roof sometimes, you know.
Yeah, because I was going to kind of ask, like, what would you say some of the major differences might be if you walked into a messianic celebration?
We have had visitors who are not sure who Jesus is, and they are Jewish, and they come and they see a messianic congregation, and they say, wow, everybody seems like they're serious, like they really believe, and they're engaged, and they love each other. It's not like my shul, not like my synagogue.
Wow.
I like this place. This is alive. It's like everything that I'm used to, but there's life.
Wow. So what are some of the major objections that you might face?
That's an excellent question.
Yeah.
And you would think that they would be theological questions. But most of the questions that we get are social questions. I could not believe like you believe because, and then fill in the blank, my husband, my father, my mother, my sister will disown me, they won't understand, and I can't be part of the family anymore. So whether it's true or not doesn't make a difference. It's how is it going to impact my life.
Wow.
I think to me that's the thing I hear most often. And I remember sharing the Bible with an older lady, and she said, I'm too old to change. And I said, you know what? That's probably true. Thankfully, you don't have to change. You just have to know that Jesus is there for you, and he wants to be your righteousness. And if you will have him be your righteousness, then you will have the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh will come in, and slowly you will begin to change. And the things that you found you liked before that God doesn't like, you'll stop liking. And that happens. And I've seen that happen with elderly
Paul
ladies.
said it, right? The things I used to love, I now hate. The things I used to hate, I now love, right?
God is asking people to convert from their sin, not to convert from their culture. So you should, you know, keep your culture unless it's sticking little pins in voodoo dolls or something like that, you know, and celebrate that. Eat what you eat, you know, and new life in Messiah.
So some of the theological questions would be like this. We Jews believe in one God, not three. So explain that to me.
Yeah, and then we touch on the triune nature of God, or the plurality
we'll talk
of
about
God.
that, right?
We see it all throughout, even early, the first 5 books of the Bible. We have references to let us make man in our image. We have
Elohim.
the word echad. The Shema is the touchstone of the Jewish people. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. It comes from Deuteronomy, at chapter 6. And that word echad, the Lord is one, is kind of a composite unity, the same word that's used of a cluster of grapes, you know. Then we have Psalm number 2 that says, kiss the Son, do homage to the Son, S-O-N, lest he be angry and you perish in the way. Or a riddle in Proverbs 30 that says, who, you know, laid out the foundations of the earth? Can you tell me what is his name and what is his son's name as well? The Messiah is really the prince, and we have that in that. Remember the Charlie Brown Christmas special? Things are not working out well, and so Linus starts quoting Isaiah 9. I don't know how he gets away with that, but Linus says, you know, that the government will be upon his shoulder, and he'll be a wonderful counselor, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. He says he'll be the mighty God. A baby will be the mighty God. So throughout the law and the prophets and the writings. As a matter of fact, you just reminded me of something. Very late in the Gospel of Luke, in Luke chapter 24, Jesus has already risen and the stone has been rolled back. He's beginning to appear to his disciples. When he comes to them in the upper room and says, everything that was written about me must be fulfilled, that the Messiah must suffer, and that he'll rise again on the 3rd day, and that forgiveness will be preached in his name among the nations. What he says right before that is, everything that is written about me in the law and the prophets and the Psalms, he's already mentioning the three divisions of the Hebrew Bible, the 39 books of the Old Testament by name. And he's saying basically, let me put it tongue-in-cheek, those are the only parts that talk about me, just the law, the prophets, and the writings.
So that gets along with one of the other common theological issues, which is Jesus never claimed to be Messiah.
Unless you were the woman at the well, and you would have heard it first person, firsthand.
But Jewish people today don't really, I think a lot of my people don't understand who the Messiah will be and what he will do. So some people are not looking for a person.
No.
They're looking for a messianic era when there will be peace.
Peace. And take your newspaper and look at it, and it's not very peaceful. And so the wolf doesn't recline with the lamb, so they say, I guess your boy Jesus is not the one we're looking for.
Right, because there is no peace in the world.
Yes.
So Alan, how do we like to answer that Jesus didn't bring peace?
If you look at all of the predictions about the Messiah and you ask reporter questions about it, you come up with almost 2 job descriptions instead of 1. I'm not saying there's 2 Messiahs. I'm saying there's a suffering servant and there's a reigning king.
Yes.
There's one who is like a lamb before its shears, and he's silent and he dies, and someone else goes free for the purpose of, for the sake of Israel, to whom my people, the prophet says, to whom the stroke is due. And then you have this reigning king that corrals evil, and because he's so strong and he's sitting on the throne, the meek of the earth no longer are doormats. They don't get steamrolled over. He creates peace by his own strength. Both of those motifs are in the scriptures. So we say first things first. Let me make it real simple. There's a crown of thorns first, and then there's the royal crown and the scepter and the rule and the patching up of this planet. Get it back to what it was supposed to be in Genesis.
And did Jesus bring peace? Well, I have to tell you, in my life, Jesus brought peace between me and God. That's an eternal peace.
Yes, yes.
The kind of peace that we're looking for here in the world,
Yes,
he will bring
temporal,
eventually.
right?
Right,
Yes.
but it's the lasting peace, the eternal peace Jesus has brought. And I believe he will come again, and at that time every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, and then there will be peace on earth.
Yes.